Good morning, everybody. So as Anthea said, I'm Helen and I'm from Trident Group, and I'm going to share with you today the circumstances that led to the Housing Ombudsman's severe maladministration findings, what we learnt from that and what we do differently now. So what I will start with is sort of the background to what happened with the reporting of the ASB, how we responded, where the Housing Ombudsman became involved, and then the severe maladministration determination. So one of our residents who lived with his family on one of our estates in Birmingham reported antisocial behaviour to us that was originating from a neighbour's property. And those reports were around verbal abuse, threatening behaviour, and suspected drug dealing. At the time, the reports of antisocial behaviour were dealt with by the antisocial behaviour officer at the time. And during that time, we had quite a lot of involvement and were supporting along with our antisocial behaviour policy. During probably about 12 months later, the situation was still ongoing, and the Housing Ombudsman corresponded with us on several occasions to inform us that the resident was dissatisfied with the way that we were handling the reports of antisocial behaviour, and asked us to provide a formal response to the resident's complaint. Unfortunately, at that time, the complaints administrator and the antisocial behaviour officer dealt with that continually in line with our antisocial behaviour policy, and also in a very informal way. So the correspondence that we had both with the resident and the Housing Ombudsman Service was very conversational, very informal, and we didn't identify or recognise or understand the way that was being impacted on the resident, or the seriousness in which we should have been handling that, or the correct policy and procedure that we should have been dealing with that. So the antisocial behaviour continued, and it resulted to some degree in the resident experiencing a physical assault and some criminal damage to his property, again, that was reported through to us. The resident stated that the neighbour was responsible and the neighbour's son was responsible for the criminal damage. And despite this, we continued to treat this as an antisocial behaviour matter, and didn't take this down the formal complaint route. The resident was being supported through our community safety team in relation to the issues of antisocial behaviour, and as such, was being dealt with it through that route, and it didn't touch our complaints process at that point. So we recognise, obviously now that, there was a lot of failings at that time, the way that we handled it, the way that we dealt with it, the way that we engaged with the Housing Ombudsman Service. And the result of that was that the Housing Ombudsman then issued a complaint handling failure order to us, which we dealt with, and we responded to the requests in terms of that. However, we still continued to treat this as an antisocial behaviour matter. We worked with the police and treated that through the criminal matters and that process. We did communicate with the resident. We worked with the police to obtain a priority move for the family. We organised some remedial work to be done at the property to make the property a little bit more secure. And we also then checked with the resident to see if there was any more practical arrangements that were outstanding that we could have done at that time. However, the residents still remained dissatisfied with our response, and again complained to the Housing Ombudsman Service, which absolutely then resulted in the determination that we received of a severe maladministration finding. The outcome of the severe maladministration was that we were asked to consider issuing an apology from our chief executive, that we were to pay the resident compensation for the handling of the antisocial behaviour and the failings in our handling of the complaint, to carry out a risk assessment and vulnerability assessment of the household, and also to develop an action plan with the resident in terms of the antisocial behaviour and a resolution to that. Also to review our complaints handling process in accordance with the complaint handling code, and to comply with these orders and reply to the Housing Ombudsman Service within a 6-week period of that date. Obviously, we complied with all of those orders, and we were able to give a resolution to that. So I suppose that sort of gives a bit of a context as to why we ended up with the severe maladministration determination, and quite rightly so. There was, countless missed opportunities. There was absolutely poor communication. There was little regard for the effect that this was having on the resident and their family. It damaged the confidence in that resident in us as a landlord, enabling them to live peacefully in their home. So, in hindsight, absolutely, it was a really, really poorly handled case. However, we have absolutely learnt from this. We've changed, a number of practices, processes, ways in which we deliver services, how we support residents, how we've trained our staff across the organisation. So if I move now to talk to you about some of the things that we've done, and that is, I think that's on the next slide, Anthea. That's the one. So what we did as a result of this, but also as a result of the the complaint handling code, the focus that we as an organisation then did and directed towards our complaints and our complaint handling, how we manage that in and out of the organisation. Some of the things that we did, we adopted a trauma-informed approach across the organisation, and that was from our board, senior leadership team, all of the different departments and functions across the organisation, whether they are front-facing housing officers, community safety team, repairs and maintenance operatives, even our back office staff of finance, HR, every part of the organisation was involved in looking at how we move to a more trauma-informed approach and a psychologically informed environment in supporting our residents, more understanding of and a response to the people that we work with and who live in their homes within our communities. So, and again, this was recognising the multiple needs of the people that live, with us, and that the services that we offer actually framework and support the individuals and their families, rather than, applying a strict policy and procedure and a very transactional approach. We were looking at a very person-centred approach to handling antisocial behaviour and managing our complaints. That's probably been in place 18 months now, And although we did a big push with that at the start to make sure that we were able to roll that out and embed it across the organisation, we didn't want to see that as okay, we've done that, we've ticked that box. We have regular refreshers. We have groups that are champions across the organisation, and we test that to make sure that we're still doing what we said that we were going to do. One of the other things that we did this year, starting in over the summer, was a big knock. So that again was a whole organisational approach, and this was about us learning more about who lives in our communities, who lives in the homes, learn more about them, update our records, and identify any of those things that affect our residents and customers on a daily basis. Either in a short term, it might be an immediate change in circumstances, or it might be something that is more long lasting, sort of any vulnerabilities, any other support needs that anybody within the household might have that might affect them living well within the tenancy. So that was a way that we were able to do those door knocking and speak to people. Again, us also then being able to update our records and make sure that any of those vulnerabilities are flagged on our housing management system, so that when we have a front page that pops up when we go into residents' records, we have an up-to-date picture of what's happening with that family and any vulnerabilities and any things that we need to be aware of that will dictate how we approach or how we deliver that person-centred support to them. We also reviewed our complaints, how we dealt with complaints. We reviewed the structure. So we looked at a customer experience team. So the customer experience team are absolutely dedicated to handling complaints, managing complaints in and out of the organisation. Not just that in terms of the policy and procedure and that we're meeting deadlines, but also sharing the learning from the complaints that we have. Certainly over the past 6 months, we have seen a significant reduction in our stage 2 complaints. So we're seeing a lot more being resolved at stage 1, and not many then escalating up to stage 2. And obviously this is in some way a result of how we're managing complaints, how we're responding to them, how we're dealing with them at a first point, how we're utilising that person-centred contact, how we are looking at, what would be the best outcome and what would be the best resolution for the customer, and how we can make that happen, and also the communication. So having that communication with somebody that is looking to make a complaint, so that there is that sort of personal interaction very early on. The lessons learned, the themes, we look at the themes of the complaints that are coming through. We also look at the areas where particularly we might not get many complaints. Is there a particular demographic location, and how do we promote that within the localities in which we work? So again, looking at how we publicise our complaints. We have Complaints Awareness Week, we have complaints at individual locality and neighbourhood residents meetings. We have that ability to be able to translate and put information in easy read formats, so that we are giving an equal opportunity to all of our residents to tell us when they're not happy with something that we've done. We have sessions on spotlight reports from the Housing Ombudsman, looking at key learning from those and looking at how we can translate that into some of our practices and approaches, particularly sort of going back to the trauma-informed approach and the psychologically informed environments, very much around the attitudes, respects and rights, and being very human-centric around that. The customer experience team also monitor the actions that we say that we will do with customers as outcomes of complaints, and we follow that up to make sure that everything that we've said that we were going to do as a resolution to a complaint has been done, and that we recheck with the residents that they're happy that all of that has been done. So sort of a check-in after the complaint has been closed down. We've also looked at our complaints training across the organisation. So complaints training and complaints is part of our induction sessions that we have with new staff, again, regardless of the role that they're coming to undertake within the organisation. Team training across the organisation as well. So anybody that works within the organisation has some impact directly or indirectly on a customer's experience when living with us. So again, you know, we do that with our finance colleagues, HR, repairs and maintenance, all of our housing teams, and that training is rolled out across the organisation. We also have Complaints Awareness Week throughout the year, again linking into ensuring that we are reaching all sections of our communities, and everybody is aware of our complaints process and how to access that. We also have an e-learning module that all staff are required to undertake as well around complaints. So we're really trying to embed that into the organisation, that complaints isn't just dealt with by the complaints team. Everybody has a part to play in that, either in the prevention of a failure service becoming a complaint, or how that's managed in terms of responding officers, resolutions and prevention in the future. We've also reviewed and embedded our risk and vulnerability assessment for all antisocial behaviour cases. Again, as a result of the learning from this particular case, particularly around safeguarding, and that's not just child safeguarding, that's adult safeguarding again, and looking at the safeguarding of the household, and how we can do that, and again around those risk assessments, and keeping people safe, but also looking at, are there other areas or other agencies that might benefit being involved in a case. So again, using that trauma-informed approach, and looking at sort of all aspects of a resident, and is there any other risks or any other needs that we need to be aware of that would help, not just resolve the case, but would help in a long-term basis as well. We have the weekly complaints meetings now, and again, this is about reviewing the complaints, the responses, again identifying risk areas, but again monitoring actions as well. So we feel we've got a tighter handle, an understanding of the complaints that are coming in and out of the organisation. We also reviewed our antisocial behaviour and community safety team, and reviewed the resources that we had across the organisation for that. So we reformed and restructured that, again linking in with the customer experience team and our resident engagement team, going out to sites, doing road shows. We are increasing our estate champions, who can sort of be that link, resident estate champions, who can link in with us, sort of neighbourhood walkabouts, estate walkabouts, etc. Again, looking to identify any potential low-level antisocial behaviour that's taking place, but also raise the awareness of, you know, residents' responsibilities in terms of antisocial behaviour, and living well within their own home, but within the community, and sort of identifying, you know, what might constitute antisocial behaviour, and how we can, you know, deal with issues at a lot sooner, and a more preventative approach to that. Within our systems and processes as well, we reviewed our complaints and antisocial behaviour modules that we have on our system. So again, that reflected sort of how we are required to deal with complaints in line with the code. How we can monitor those as well, how we can analyze, produce the data, and really sort of look down into quite granular levels. Some of those areas around complaints, the themes, the demographics, again, antisocial behaviour, what are we seeing, you know, how's it being handled, are we handling it well? So again, that sort of enabled us to become more effective and efficient in terms of managing our complaints and antisocial behaviour, and much more scrutiny as well by senior managers as well, and the reporting that then goes up to our Housing and Communities Committee, but also to our board as well. And then we also reviewed our vulnerable persons policy, and we did this again with involvement with our residents group as well, so that they were able to have a look at this and give us their thoughts and feelings on that. And again, something that links into, you know, how we're approaching that from a person-centric stance, and we're looking at the person. So again, really sort of flipping, you know, that focus as a result of this. So sort of that's what happened, and that's what we did about it, and some of that learning and what we do differently now. So if we can just nip onto the next slide, please. But what I would say is, I don't think could it happen to us again? It could do. You know, we would never say never. We don't want to become complacent, and you know, we have done a lot of work and we have put a lot of measures in, but it's not about us just saying, well, we've got all of this, so it's not likely that, you know, anything like this would ever happen again. I think it's about keeping it real, testing, you know, are we doing what we say we're going to do? Are the systems that we put in, you know, working for us? Are we looking at the analysis that comes through? Are our customers feeling that difference? Are people that, you know, are coming to us that are dissatisfied, you know, do they feel, although they may not get the outcome that they have actually wanted, but do they feel that they've been listened to? Do they feel that it's been dealt with in a timely manner? Do they feel that they've been communicated with? So it's about us just sort of testing it and following that up, and that's the only way that we'll know that we're sort of moving towards the right, moving towards where we want to be. But, you know, I would never say that, you know, it could never happen to us again. I would like to think that we've got all of the things in place that we have. I think we've certainly moved forward, you know, a lot in terms of the mechanisms that we have in place, the prevention that we've got in place, the policies and procedures that we've got in place, the teams that we've got in place now, are all moving us towards that that position, but you know, it is, I suppose, not being complacent, following up, and we have a complaints panel now that sort of test it for us as well. And we invite people who have gone through that process, who probably haven't had a good experience with us in the past, so that they can, you know, tell us, you know, tell us how it is. And again, be part of that review, be part of, you know, are we getting it right? And in turn then, linking that back through our tenant satisfaction measures, you know, and is what we're sort of seeing, is that what our residents are seeing as well, and are they telling us that too? So that's sort of a bit of a whistle stop tour of our experience, and you know, happy to sort of answer any questions or share anything else that people might want to ask.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Helen. That was really interesting. And actually, I can see we've got a question here from Claire. Claire, would you like to come in?
Hello, Helen. Lovely to meet you. My name's Claire Devonshire, and I'm a housing strategy officer for Thurrock Council. So as you're going through the kind of the backstory of what happened within the Trident Group, I was really particularly interested with regards to the ASB policy and the vulnerability policy. Was there the missed opportunities within those documents, whether it was those documents needed to become more robust, or was it more officer understanding and actual implementation of those policies that kind of led to those missed opportunities?
I think in our situation, it was more around the embedding the policies and procedures, and it was more around the officers understanding how they should be dealing with that particular case, and potentially the escalation of that as well. So yeah, we didn't have at that time, because this is quite a historical case. It's going back to 2017 when it initially started. We didn't have a vulnerability policy in place at that time. We had an antisocial behaviour policy, and obviously complaints policy at that time, which, you know, has since undergone you know, a massive review, and I think that the officers that were involved in that time weren't operating in the way that, you know, we would want them to now. So we didn't have a vulnerability policy, and the ASB policy we did have wasn't followed in the way that we would have wanted it to be.
Yeah, because it's really hard, because obviously when you're kind of back office, so to speak, and to you it makes sense on paper, you know, you're following the law, you've got kind of all those bases covered, but when you don't do that frontline job and you're not the one having to make those decisions in the moment or handle things as they come, it can be hard to see where that falters. And obviously until you get an opportunity, not a great opportunity maybe, but to have that learning curve and to see how it's played out. So that's why I was really interested to see if it was more a strategic decision that needed to change, or whether it was just that disconnect. So thank you, that's really helpful.
Yeah, and I think that the point around the policy and procedure and officers following that, again, there was a bit of a disconnect, and also it was very transactional. You know, we didn't we dealt with it almost as a not totally in line with the policy, but, you know, have we done this, we need to do that, rather than what impact is this having on the resident, what else is the you know, that we could look to do, what other things are impacting this, you know, what other agencies, etc., could we have, you know, have involved. And, you know, hindsight's a wonderful thing, isn't it? But, you know, I think from then to now, the support that is given to officers on the ground is a lot more as well. So and again, sort of that, what I was saying about testing it as well, that housing officers and front facing operatives sort of don't revert back, sort of thing.
Perfect, thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Claire. Really good question there. We have a question from Harriet in the chat. So Harriet says, I would be interested to know more on the Complaints Awareness Week and how you roll that out to residents.
So we advertise it through our social media platforms, and our resident engagement team go out to sites in advance of the Complaints Awareness Week. We have a van. So we go and sort of pitch up at various sites. We have some communal rooms in some of our sites and locations as well. And so our customer experience team go along with our resident engagement team, and we have drop-ins. We have sort of information on, you know, what the complaints is, what constitutes a complaint, how people can you know, complain to us. So we do that across all of the sort of the locations where we have our properties. And then obviously we also do that within the organisation as well. So our Complaints Awareness Week isn't just for our residents, it's for our staff as well. So we have sort of posts, etc., that go out on our intranet. We have short videos from some of our customers that have are on our customer voice group, again, so that our staff aren't just hearing our staff's voices, but they're also hearing residents' voices as well. And also we've got a really strong customer voice group, and we've got 2 that are estate champions. So they will also go out with our customer engagement team and talk to residents as well, and sort of tell them, you know, sort of how to access us, you know, what complaints are, and again, not just about that, but what we learn from them as well. So it's about giving our residents that information of you know, what our complaints process is as well, but also giving them that information of what we do with it, you know, because some residents might think, well, what if I complain, nothing might get done about it, or what's going to change? At least then we can go back and say, you know, these are some of the improvements that we've made in terms of lessons learnt from, you know, particular complaints as well. So it's about sharing that as well, and again, that will hopefully then increase the confidence that our residents have in us listening to them, us listening and acting, really.
Thank you very much. We have a question from Gillian about complaints training, and Gillian has asked whether that's something that you deliver or have developed in-house, or have you sourced it externally?
No, that's something that we've developed in-house. So our customer engagement, customer experience manager has developed the training, and a lot of the subject matter is sort of case, you know, actual complaints that have that we've dealt with, sort of what's gone wrong, identifying what's gone wrong, looking at how we could have done things differently, referring to sort of the complaints policy, how we need to manage complaints in line with the regulatory compliance. So everybody has an understanding of what a complaint is, how to prevent complaints, the process that we have to manage those, the involvement of other people across the organisation in responding to and resolving complaints, and how we continually share the learning from that. So it's a programme that we've developed in-house. And it's rolled out by that team, so that team will go out to various teams, locations, departments across the organisation.
Thank you, that sounds really good. We have a question from Becky. So Becky says, have you seen any improvement in your TSM score, TP09, complaint handling with all the changes you put in place? I just wonder if your improvements have changed customer perception, and if so, which actions have had the biggest effect?
So we have seen an increase in satisfaction. I mean, our scores weren't great anyway, if I'm honest. But we have improved those. Certainly over the last 3 quarters, we've seen a quarter-on-quarter improvement. We also have an external company that collates our TSMs, who does our TSMs on our behalf. And what we have done in the first 2 quarters was specifically ask additional questions around complaints. So if somebody has made a complaint, who did they complain to? Were they satisfied with the outcome? And what the organisation will do, they will then give us that information in real time. If the resident is happy to give us their contact details, then we will then make contact and see how we can resolve or pick that up if there is any areas of dissatisfaction. So we're doing that in a real-time process. And we are finding that is having a really positive impact. So I think it's difficult to know what exact action has enabled us to increase those scores. But I think with the responses that we're giving, and we're also using that real-time data in terms of our tenant satisfaction measures, that we're hoping then that will contribute to the increased continuation of satisfaction measures. So we just want to keep on that trajectory, really.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Helen. Are there any further questions for Helen before we come to the end of the session? I think that's all of the questions in the chat. So if there are no further questions, just a really big thank you from me, Helen, for coming along and for such a sort of open and honest presentation, and for giving us all of that insight to sort of what happened right from the start of that complaint all the way to the beginning. And it's been really interesting to hear about all of the work that you've been doing and all of those changes you've been making. And I particularly like that, you said, it's about sort of keep on reviewing those changes, keep going back and making sure, that you don't come complacent, and working with those residents as well. It's really important. But thank you. It's been really interesting. And thank you everyone for coming and for all of your questions. I'm going to pop a link to an evaluation form in the chat, as I mentioned earlier. So if you can give us your feedback, that would be brilliant. And we'll share the recording once it's available with you all as well, in case you want to kind of share that with your colleagues. But thank you very much, Helen, and thank you everyone for coming as well.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.